On the scorching sands of the Gulf, a Turkish Bayraktar TB2 glides silently while roughly 2,000 kilometers away. In the salty waters of the eastern Mediterranean, a Greek frigate tries to shadow the course of a Turkish research vessel. As headlines are dominated by energy crises and economic contractions, behind the curtain, states have pushed their defense budgets to a staggering level, exactly $2.63 trillion. This figure is not merely a procurement list. It is the construction cost of a new, dark, and extremely complex world order. Dear friends, strategy enthusiasts, and fellow travelers who are not content just to watch, but strive to understand the world, welcome. If your tea or coffee is ready, today we will go far beyond the headlines and discuss those invisible moves on the global chessboard. It is time for us to talk, because the world is on the verge of a transformation much faster than the one we know. Lean back, leave the noise of the outside world behind. Today on this table, we have very critical files. We will discuss why the second Turkish base rising in Qatar is not just a military installation but a security architecture. Israel's decade-long but now crossroads Mabam, war between wars doctrine, and how this doctrine has created a resistance axis. And not only that, we will look at the new networked models replacing the dusty linear cycles of the intelligence world dating back to 1948, as described by Emir Muhik, and the lethal AI-driven decisions of this model. We will put everything on the table. From Iran's wiper malware attacks to the irony of the West's glass house as it confronts the digital monsters it built itself. If you enjoy such in-depth analysis and geopolitical chats, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like the video, and make your voice heard by leaving a hype in the comments. If you are ready, let us begin this strategic journey to understand how modern defense strategies are shaped not only on the front lines, but also in the cyber world and logistics bases. Why do you think the world is once again surrounded by military bases, energy lines, and invisible cyber armies as it was 100 years ago? Why? In an era when winds of peace and shared global prosperity are expected, is every country sharpening its sword and thickening its shield? The 2025-2026 data from the International Institute for Strategic Studies hits us in the face with a cold reality. Global defense spending has reached an all-time high of $2.63 trillion. This is not just a number, it is a fear index. Look at European spending. The region allocated $563 billion to defense in 2025. That is an increase of a full $100 billion from the previous year. Germany alone, driven by fear of Russia, increased its budget by 18% to $107 billion. The Nordic countries Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden have doubled their spending from 2020 levels to $53.7 billion. Even more striking, despite cost of living crises and high inflation at home, countries like Nigeria have increased their defense budget by a real 75% to $2.04 billion. This is not a choice but a geopolitical necessity. States are returning to that ancient and harsh rule that peace can only be preserved by being ready for war at all times. Si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Now, let us go to the first stop where these colossal expenditures materialize, the heart of the Gulf. As noted by seasoned analyst Bülent Aranda from the Institute for Strategic Thinking, Turkey's presence in Qatar is not a simple story of guest troops. A second massive base has now been added next to the Doctrine. Tariq bin Zayed garrison established in 2015. But why? Remember when Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt imposed that famous blockade on Qatar on June 5, 2017, they presented a list of 13 demands. Do you know what was at the top of that list? Close the Turkish base and immediately end military cooperation with Turkey. That demand was an existential threat to Qatar at the time. Turkey's intervention there changed the balance of power overnight. Today, that base is the most critical link in a Turkish security arc stretching from Somalia to Djibouti, from Suakin Island in Sudan to Qatar. These bases are both a contrast and a response to the British strategy of 100 years ago. just as the British seized Cyprus, the bases at Akrotiri and Takalia in 1878 for strategic depth. Turkey today is acting with similar strategic depth to protect its blue homeland. Back then, Britain wanted to control sea routes. Today, energy basins have been added to that. In the Eastern Mediterranean today, a huge chess game is unfolding. There is an Israeli-Hellenic alliance centered on Israel, the Greek Cypriot administration, Greece, and Egypt, trying to exclude Turkey. On the other side of that alliance, Turkey is establishing a line of resistance with its own drill ships, Fatih, Yavuz, Barbaros, and its navy. The agenda of the main actors in that opposing bloc, Israel, desire to transport gas from the Leviathan and Tamar fields to Europe bypassing Turkey. Greek Cypriot administration and Greece, strategy of confining Turkey to the Gulf of Antalya with the Sevilla map. Fantasy, France and USA, effort to parcel out energy plots in the region via giants like Total and Exxon. Turkey, the continental shelf move extending as far as the Libya-Crete line. Declaring no game can be played at this table without me, a combination of hard and soft power. As Bülent Arandis says, Erdpeho reads the deep game and draws Turkey's borders not only with physical boundaries, but with geopolitical influence. Now let us deepen with some academic sincerity. A concept has marked Israel's last decade, Mabam, or campaign between wars. According to analyses by Ofor Sheila and Karmit Valenci of INSEE, this doctrine aimed to weaken the enemies, Iran and Hezbollah, capacity with surgical interventions without entering an all-out war. But today, this strategy is at a crossroads. Experts warn Cebu may have reached a point where it is now more harmful than beneficial. Why? Because these operations have further cemented the Iran-led axis of resistance and exposed Israel to the risk of a multi-front conflict ready to explode at any moment. This is where Amir Muhaik's revolutionary analysis comes in. Muhaik says that the famous linear intelligence cycle, plan, collect, process, analyze, disseminate, established by Glass and Davidson in 1948 is now dead. Why? Because today's threat is not linear, it is asymmetric. Cyber and physical intertwined in a special warfare. Muhaik's proposed networked intelligence model breaks the hierarchy and merges the analyst, operator, and decision-maker in the same digital pool. The most concrete and frightening example of this theory appears in Wyon's reports, Israel's new artificial intelligence platform. This platform processes Mossad's deep field intelligence, cyber data, and deep surveillance networks in seconds, mapping the habits, vulnerabilities, and routes of Iranian leaders. The result? Since the beginning of the war, more than 250 high-ranking Iranian figures have been liquidated by AI decision. That networked structure Muhaik speaks of is no longer just an information-sharing platform. It is an algorithm engine that makes lethal decisions. War is no longer in the barrel of tanks, but in the invisible codes at the tips of keyboards. Aaron Roberts and Joshua Mooney from Kennedy's Law speak of a terrifying risk awaiting the business world, wiper malware. The software does not encrypt data and ask for money like known ransomware. It simply deletes it. There is no return. Its purpose is economic devastation and psychological attrition. The attack speed of over 60 Iran-linked threat groups, of which 53 are directly on the pro-Iranian side, on Western energy and finance giants is increasing by the day. However, the legal dimension of the issue is more painful than the technical one. When a company is hit by a cyber attack and tries to make a payment to recover its data, if a backdoor has been opened, it runs into the walls of the U.S. IEPA, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and TWIA, Trading with the Enemy Act, paying directly or indirectly. A sanctioned Iranian group carries penalties of up to $11,562 civil fine per violation and even imprisonment. Moreover, the boundaries between the cyber and physical worlds have completely collapsed. Drone attacks on Amazon Web Services data centers in the UAE and Bahrain prove that cyber warfare is no longer just a software issue but creates a saturation effect targeting physical infrastructure. Here we must stop and ask, who created this digital monster? The famous Stuxnet story told in Kim Zetter's book Countdown to Zero Day is the biggest boomerang of modern history. When the US and Israel deployed Stuxnet to hit Iran's nuclear program, they actually opened a Pandora's box. Security expert Marcus Reinham's famous quote, cited in Zetter's book, is more relevant today than ever. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. With Stuxnet, they gifted the IP, intellectual property of cyber weapons, to the world. Now, more advanced versions of those weapons are coming back to strike them. The West has lost its ethical high ground in cyber armament. When platforms that identify targets with AI, as in the Wyon example, leave lethal decisions to the cold hands of algorithms, humanity is being dragged to the edge of a new moral abyss. The media's presentation of these surgical strikes as success stories actually hides the devastation of an asymmetric war of attrition. So what is our role in this dark picture for countries like Turkey? The Blue Homeland and Strategic Autonomy projects are not merely political slogans. They are lines of resistance against these multi-arena conflicts. To survive in the future world is possible not just by having a strong army, but by saying, I am also here in every field, from domestic defense industry to cybersecurity architecture, from energy lines to national consciousness. The domestic office, the mind. You initiatives are not just about producing an aircraft. It is about refusing to be someone else's pawn, with the software behind that UAV and the network-based intelligence guiding it. Being ready for the future is not about providing temporary quiet with a mowing the lawn strategy. It is about establishing a deep deterrent and national will. Dear listeners, today we've tried to uncover those invisible moves on the global chessboard. The fear and strategy behind that colossal $2.63 trillion spending. The numbers may be frightening, the technology's complex, but remember that knowledge itself is our greatest shield. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this long and deep journey. If you have any questions, additions, or points you think I missed, I am waiting for you in the comments below. Don't forget to follow our social media accounts and share this analysis with your strategy-minded friends. Until the next episode, may your tea be fresh, your mind sharp, and your strategic depth enduring. Goodbye.